I married my husband this year, but we dated for a little over a year. We messed around before we got married, and it was fun, but he never made me finish. My first mistake was telling him I did and keeping up that lie until now. I could tell when he was running out of stamina or he was about to finish, and to avoid prolonging or making things awkward, I just said I did as well. And I tried really hard to. I just couldn't. I was okay with that gig at the time, but now it's starting to take a toll. He teases me that he's made me finish multiple times when we have intimacy. That is not the case. He just kept asking if I did, and I didn't want to make him feel bad. That's been on rinse and repeat ever since. Anywho, we are married now, and it's getting harder and harder to fake it. The last 4 times we've been intimate, I told him I wasn't aroused, but I will lay down and he could do his thing, which he obliged. Honestly, I was so glad I didn't have to put on a show or lie. He told me he feels bad that he got all the pleasure and I didn't, but he doesn't know the half of it. Look, I know I'm the jerk and that I should have been honest from the start, but I can't really change that now. I've been sexually abused in the past, and I guess it messed me up a bit. I don't know where to go from here and would like some advice on how to proceed. It's to the point where I can't wait for him to go to work so I can finally get my rocks off, since I can't with him, and he can't help. So it's pretty bad. Any advice welcome. And one other thing I forgot, he's pretty against toys, which is disappointing. I love vibrators, but he feels like they are competition, and he will do just as good of a job as a piece of plastic. Blah, blah. So yeah, long story short, I don't know if I should just come clean or what. To add, just to answer a few common questions. 1. Yes, we do foreplay and lots of it. I still just never get there. 2. People keep being jerks about the fact that we are married. And my response is that marriage is more than intimacy. Intimacy is just a bump in the road and not a relationship ender for me. Which is why I was asking for advice on the intimacy, not personal hateful opinions on my marriage. 3. I don't blame him for issues, and I apologize if it sounded like I was. 4. I don't think it was bad for him to take up an offer I proposed, the laying there while he got off. I don't feel used or abused, as a lot of you are suggesting. I have been in sexually hurtful relationships, and my husband is not that, at all. 5. I know I shouldn't have lied. Trust me, I wish I hadn't. Y'all don't need to remind me that I'm a jerk. I am very aware. I just wanted some advice to help me move forward. 6. I am in therapy, but I don't like to talk about intimacy. Thank you to all the people who've answered my question. It's helped. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This is more than just he hasn't made you finish. To me, this is about you hiding part of who you are. You are this intimacy being who uses vibrators and gets your rocks off by yourself, and who really wants to orgasm with your husband. But for some reason, when you are with your husband, you lie about having orgasms and lay there so he can use you, hoping he comes, hoping he'll leave soon so you can take care of yourself. At some point, you're going to have to assert yourself, sister. I think you are having a harder time faking it because you are growing tired of not being your full and complete self. It gets weary being inauthentic. Come clean. Comment 2. It's crazy to me that everyone is glossing over the fact that you told him you weren't aroused, and he was more than willing to use your body as a human pocket. Female genitalia. I feel like there is more here to the story, because that part really grosses me out. It doesn't sound like he's worried about your pleasure at all. If he knows about your intimacy trauma, he doesn't care about that either because he objectified you and used you like what was done to you before. I'm sorry. Now, for the update. Thanks for reading my last post and for all the advice. So, here's what's been happening over the past week. After reading through your comments, I decided it was time to have a serious talk with my husband. I couldn't keep lying to him, and I knew that if I wanted things to get better, I had to be honest. So one evening after dinner, I sat him down and told him we needed to talk. I was nervous, but I knew it was now or never. I started by telling him that I had been lying about finishing during intimacy. I explained that I had been doing it to avoid making him feel bad, but that it was taking a toll on me. He was shocked and hurt, which I expected, but he listened. I told him about my past intimacy abuse and how it had affected me. He was quiet for a while, and then he said he wished I had told him sooner. He said he felt like he had failed me as a husband, which broke my heart. We talked for a long time that night. I told him about my love for vibrators and how they helped me. He was still against the idea, but he said he was willing to try and understand. We agreed to take things slow and to communicate more openly about our needs and desires. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was hopeful that things would get better. The next few days were a bit awkward, but we were trying. We decided to take a break from intimacy and focus on other forms of intimacy. We spent more time cuddling, talking, and just being close to each other. It was nice, but I could tell he was still struggling with the idea that he hadn't been able to satisfy me. I reassured him that it wasn't his fault and that we were in this together. Then, a few days later, something happened that changed everything. My husband came home from work with a surprise. He had bought a vibrator. He said he had been doing some research and wanted to give it a try. I was touched by his gesture and excited to see if it would help. That night, we decided to use the vibrator together. At first, it was a bit awkward, but we soon found a rhythm that worked for both of us. For the first time in our relationship, I was able to finish with him. It was an amazing feeling, and I could see the relief and happiness on his face. I thought we had finally found a solution to our problem, but things took a turn for the worse the next day. My husband started acting distant and withdrawn. He seemed to be avoiding me, and when I asked him what was wrong, he said he was fine. I knew something was bothering him, but he wouldn't talk about it. I started to worry that he was regretting our decision to use the vibrator. A few days later, he finally opened up. He said that while he was happy that I had finished, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't enough for me. He said he felt like he had been replaced by a piece of plastic, and that it was affecting his self-esteem. I tried to reassure him that it wasn't true, but he was adamant. He said he needed some time to think and that he was going to stay with a friend for a few days. I was devastated. I thought we had made progress, but now it felt like we were back to square one. I spent the next few days alone trying to figure out what to do. I missed him terribly and wanted to make things right, but I didn't know how. During this time, I started to reflect on our relationship and my own issues. I realized that my past trauma was still affecting me more than I had thought. I decided to talk to my therapist about it, even though I didn't like discussing intimacy. It was a difficult conversation, but it helped me understand that I needed to work on healing myself before I could fully be there for my husband. When my husband came back, we had another long talk. I told him about my therapy session and how I was committed to working on my issues. He said he was willing to support me, but that he needed to feel like he was enough for me. We agreed to take things one day at a time and to keep communicating openly, but things didn't improve. My husband continued to struggle with his feelings of inadequacy, and our intimacy suffered. We tried to be close, but there was always a lingering tension between us. It was heartbreaking to see him so unhappy, and I felt like I was failing him. One night, he told me that he didn't think he could do this anymore. He said he loved me, but that he couldn't get past the feeling that he wasn't enough. He said he needed to take care of himself, and that he thought it would be best if we took a break. I was crushed, but I understood. We agreed to separate for a while and see if we could work through our issues on our own. So that's where we are now. We're taking a break and trying to figure out what to do next. It's been a tough week, and I don't know what the future holds. But I'm hopeful that we can both find a way to heal and come back stronger. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for resenting my husband for being praised as a great dad while I struggle alone? At 25 years old, female, have been having some really strong feelings of frustration and disappointment regarding my husband, 26 years old, male, since giving birth. We had our first child last fall, and ever since then, I feel like our marriage has been a roller coaster. I know it's normal with the new stresses of having a child as well as postpartum hormones. But we're now 9 months into parenthood, and I am still easily triggered by things that wouldn't have bothered me prior to giving birth. Some of these things include watching him take his time to get the baby a bottle or something else the baby needs, not responding fast enough when the baby is crying, feeling like he is in his own world and oblivious to the baby's needs, feeling like I'm alone in parenting and he's just kind of there sometimes, watching him get to have fun with the baby for a few minutes, and getting annoyed that he isn't the one that sets something up or cleans up afterwards. Getting really frustrated to the point that I want to cry whenever someone compliments him on how great of a dad he is. I do want to add that we are in marriage counseling, and it does seem to help a bit. But I just don't know if these feelings are normal, even after so many months since giving birth. And if so, how long does this last? I truly love my husband, and I know we are both doing our best as first-time parents. I just need to know if I should ride out these emotions or seek some kind of help for my own mental health. Now for an update. Thank you so much, everyone, for the helpful tips and making me feel validated, even with tough love. I do want to provide a little more context of our dynamics in case it is helpful. 1. My husband and I have been together since high school. We have been through many periods of life, between college, me moving out of the country at one point, getting jobs, and of course, marriage. I have no thoughts of wanting to end the marriage. I want to fix it either by fixing my own thoughts or fixing the way I communicate with him. 2. The point of this post was not to bash him. It was to understand why I'm feeling the way I am lately. Is it hormones? Is it life changes? Is it being a mother and having to accept that my roles as the mother are different than his as the father? 3. I will be having a conversation with my doctor about possible postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Not because my feelings are not valid, but because I have a long history of anxiety, and it tends to morph to whatever is happening in my life. I have to adapt one way or another, and maybe to start, that means changing some of my medications. So I'm not crying every time my husband receives a compliment of being a good dad, LOL. 4. I'm a person who likes to know that everything will be okay in the end. I like to learn from other people's experiences and apply their advice to my situation. A lot of the comments this post received have been helpful in one way or another, and I appreciate it so much. Now, for a few comments before the update, comment 1. What you need to do is talk one-on-one with your counselor so you can speak freely about these things. What you are thinking and feeling are not wrong, but they are not helpful in building a strong family unit. You sound overwhelmed, and an impartial person to talk to can help you clarify your thinking. Feelings are feelings. What you do about them is what matters. Comment 2. I remember feeling like this only after the birth of my first baby. I was suffering terribly from postpartum anxiety and depression. I will add that I was consuming content that contributed to me feeling like a married single mom. And this was really harmful to my mental health and made the anger towards my husband 100 times worse. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and advice. So a lot has happened in the past 3 days. First off, I had a pretty big argument with my husband. It started when he was taking forever to get the baby a bottle. I was already on edge, and seeing him move so slowly just set me off. I snapped at him, and he snapped back, saying he was tired of me always criticizing him. It escalated quickly, and before I knew it, we were yelling at each other. The baby started crying, which only made things worse. I felt like a terrible mom and wife all at once. After we calmed down, we had a long talk. He admitted that he feels like he's walking on eggshells around me, afraid to do anything wrong. That hit me hard because I never wanted him to feel that way. I realized that my frustration was not just about him, but also about my own expectations and stress. We decided to try and be more patient with each other and communicate better. The next day, I had my appointment with my doctor. I told her everything, including the argument. She suggested that I might be dealing with postpartum depression and anxiety, which could be amplifying my frustrations. She recommended adjusting my medication and also suggested I see a therapist who specializes in postpartum issues. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that there might be a reason for my feelings, and guilt for how I've been treating my husband. That evening, I tried to put some of the advice into practice. When the baby started crying, instead of immediately getting frustrated with my husband, I took a deep breath and asked him calmly if he could handle it. He did, and I used that moment to take a break and collect myself. It felt like a small victory. But then, something unexpected happened. My husband got a call from his boss saying he needed to go on a business trip for a few days. I was terrified at the thought of being alone with the baby, but I didn't want to show it. I told him it was fine and that we would manage. He left the next morning, and that's when things really started to unravel. The first day without him was a disaster. The baby was fussy all day, and I felt completely overwhelmed. I called my mom for help, but she was out of town. I ended up crying on the phone with her, feeling like I was failing at everything. That night, I barely slept because the baby kept waking up, and I was too anxious to relax. The second day was a little better. I managed to get the baby to nap for a couple of hours, and I used that time to clean up the house and take a shower. It felt good to accomplish something, even if it was small. I also had a virtual therapy session, which helped me process some of my feelings. The therapist gave me some coping strategies and reminded me that it's okay to ask for help. On the third day, my husband came back. I was so relieved to see him, but I also felt a bit of resentment. I realized that I had been holding on to a lot of anger towards him, not just for the recent issues, but for things that had built up over time. We had another long talk, and I finally opened up about how I felt like I was doing everything alone. He listened and apologized, saying he didn't realize how much I was struggling. We decided to make some changes. He's going to take on more responsibilities with the baby, and we're going to set aside time each week to talk about how we're feeling and what we need from each other. We're also going to continue with marriage counseling and make sure we're both taking care of our mental health. Looking back, I realized that a lot of my frustration came from feeling like I had to be perfect. I grew up in a family where showing weakness was not an option. My mom was a single parent, and she always seemed to have everything under control. I think I internalized that and felt like I had to do the same. But the truth is, it's okay to struggle and ask for help. One thing that really stood out to me was a memory from when I was a kid. My mom had a breakdown one night, and I remember feeling so scared and helpless. She apologized the next day and explained that even adults have moments when they can't handle everything. I think that stuck with me, and now I'm realizing that it's okay for me to have those moments too. So, we're taking it one day at a time. It's not perfect, and we still have a lot of work to do, but I feel more hopeful. I know that we both love each other and our baby, and we're committed to making this work. Thank you for reading and for all the support. Am I the idiot for venting to my friend about my husband's dismissive attitude and causing a rift in our marriage? I, 34-year-old female, am married to my husband, 33-year-old male, and we have known each other for 10 years. We have had some communication issues since the beginning, especially since I feel loved when my partner tells me I am beautiful or randomly says I love you. He was never like this, but he made efforts for me, and I always let him know how much his efforts mean to me. However, he stopped putting in efforts and verbal affirmations a few years into our marriage. So I recently had a discussion with my husband about the love languages and how we express and receive love differently. I shared with him again that words of affirmation make me feel loved and appreciated. Instead of acknowledging my feelings, he lectured me about how people often misunderstand the concept of love languages. He said that the real intention of the love languages concept is for you to recognize and appreciate the ways your partner is already showing you love, even if it's not in your preferred format, and accused me of being butthurt because he wasn't doing it my way. He told me to manage my expectations and stop getting upset because he doesn't give me the verbal praise I crave. He insisted that I should just appreciate his acts of service and implied that my need for words of affirmation is something I need to get over. His response left me feeling belittled and dismissed. It seemed like he was telling me that my feelings and needs were invalid and that I was being unreasonable. I do appreciate the thoughtful things he does for me, but his tone made it feel like my desire for verbal affirmations was something I had to ignore. What really made me mad with rage is that he implied that my expectations to want love in my preferred language are self-serving, greedy, unappreciative. And by talking about how others agree with me, I showed him a Reddit post about this. Wrong move, I know. I was patting myself on the back. How do I address this with him without escalating into an argument? Has anyone else dealt with similar issues in their relationship? How do I get through to him when he and I fundamentally disagree? He was never like this before, but now he's been digging in his heels about this, and he would not respond in a way that makes things easier for us. We even tried couples counseling, but he has his way of thinking and I have mine. We didn't go very far with this. Is this a hill to die on, or should I let this go? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I tell my fiancée she is beautiful or some variation of that numerous times a day. It costs me nothing and makes her happy, plus it's true. Why wouldn't I do that? I do not understand your husband's malfunction. Comment 2. Does your husband even like you? Like literally, no one gives a shoot what it's supposed to be. It's common sense that you would put in extra effort to be kind to someone you like in ways they understand it. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After our heated discussion about love languages, I decided to take a different approach. I thought maybe if I showed him how much his words meant to me by reciprocating in his love language, he might understand better. So I started doing more acts of service for him, like making his favorite meals, organizing his workspace, and taking care of errands he usually handles. I hoped that by showing him love in his preferred way, he might be more open to meeting me halfway with verbal affirmations. For a couple of days, things seemed to be improving. He appeared to appreciate my efforts, and I felt a bit more connected to him. However, on the third day, everything took a turn for the worse. I made a mistake that changed everything. I was feeling particularly frustrated and decided to vent to my best friend over the phone. I didn't realize my husband was within earshot. I complained about how he still wasn't giving me the verbal affirmations I needed and how his dismissive attitude was making me feel unloved. He overheard the entire conversation. Later that evening, he confronted me about it. He was furious that I had shared our private issues with someone else. He accused me of undermining him and making him look like a bad husband. I tried to explain that I was just venting and seeking advice, but he wouldn't hear it. He felt betrayed and hurt, and it only deepened the rift between us. The next day, he was distant and cold. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was curt and dismissive. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but he refused to talk about it. I felt terrible for hurting him, but I also felt frustrated that he couldn't understand my perspective. It was like we were stuck in a vicious cycle of misunderstanding and hurt. As the days went on, the tension between us grew. We started arguing more frequently, not just about the love languages, but about everything. Little things that never used to bother us became sources of conflict. It was like all the unresolved issues in our relationship were bubbling to the surface. One evening, after another heated argument, he dropped the news. He said he needed some space to think things over and decided to stay at a friend's place for a few days. I was devastated. I never thought it would come to this. I felt like our marriage was falling apart and I didn't know how to fix it. During the time he was away, I had a lot of time to reflect on our relationship. I realized that our communication issues ran deeper than just the love languages. We had been neglecting our emotional connection for a long time, and it had taken a toll on both of us. I also realized that I had been so focused on my own needs that I hadn't been fully appreciating the ways he was showing me love. But before I could talk to him about my realizations, something else happened. I found out from a mutual friend that he had been confiding in someone else as well. He had been talking to a female coworker about our issues, and they had grown close. I felt a pang of jealousy and betrayal. It felt like he was replacing me with someone else, someone who understood him better. When he finally came back home, I confronted him about it. He admitted that he had been talking to her, but insisted that it was purely platonic. He said he needed someone to talk to, someone who could give him a different perspective. But I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It felt like he had turned to someone else instead of working things out with me. Our conversation quickly turned into another argument. He accused me of being controlling and not trusting him, while I accused him of being emotionally unfaithful. It was a mess. We were both hurt and angry, and it felt like there was no way to bridge the gap between us. In the midst of all this, I started to think about our past and how we got to this point. I remembered how we used to be so in sync, how we could talk for hours about anything and everything. But somewhere along the way, we had lost that connection. I realized that our communication issues had been there from the beginning, but we had always managed to work through them. Now, it felt like we were at an impasse. I also thought about my own upbringing and how it had shaped my need for verbal affirmations. Growing up, my parents were not very expressive with their love. They showed their love through actions, but I always craved the words. I realized that this was something deeply ingrained in me, and it was something I needed to work on. but I also needed my husband to understand and meet me halfway. As I write this, I don't know what the future holds for us. We're both hurting, and it feels like we're standing on the edge of a cliff. I want to save our marriage, but I don't know if we can find a way to bridge the gap between us. I guess only time will tell. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!